Yeah, totally.
Hello, everyone. Today is April 11th. We have the honor to connect with Mr. Marcus Evans. Mr. Marcus is the founder of CalExit, a very exciting and interesting movement. Mr. Marcus is proposing that California could separate from United States, and well, in this case, uh, we agreed to make a public conversation in order to understand a little bit more about CalExit. I want uh, to give a grateful to Californian organization. Right now, I am using in the screen a tool from Google, a California organization, and I did a prompt considering different documents and the website of CalExit. Later, I am going to share it through email. I propose it to infer the common goals and problems from different proposals that I shared with them and the CalExit website. Well, the Democracy Lab in the University of San Diego that I shared a proposal. So thank you so much for giving us the honor to understand a little bit more about CalExit. And well, happy to talk with you.
Thank you for having me on. Obviously, California, as an independent country, would be a massive impact for Latin America. Basically, most of the hemisphere's Latino countries, all the way up to Mexico, two-thirds of it. And if California was independent, you know that there would be a gigantic difference in how policies would be headed between California and the rest of Latin America versus America and the rest of Latin America. For example, California is majority Latino. America is not. California was born as a Latin nation. America never was. Spanish was in the original California Constitution. That never happened with America. So honestly, the policies are wildly different. And I think that's why it's appropriate to have a conversation with all of Latin America. The policy impact is going to be specifically on the domestic U.S. state or former U.S. state of California. I want to
Also,
say thanks for having me on.
yes, yes. In fact, I was reading a little bit about California. It seems that the greatest Latin communities are located in California, and most of migrants are located in California. So in this case, it could be a good opportunity for Hispanic communities and Latin communities to evaluate this decision in California. I would like to know a little bit more about your book. I was reading that you write a book about the future of California and this problem that California is receiving less than 80% of the funds that they are providing to the federal government. Can you give us a more deep analysis about it, please?
So So California's a donor state. California's a donor state. Every person in California is federal income. This happens in most countries around the world. So every California citizen and every California business has to pay federal income taxes every year. We get about 75 cents on the dollar back. So what we get about 80% of the amount of money back. That's a little bit, yeah. So we need to work on that. But we get about 75 cents on the dollar back. We lose about 25 cents for every dollar. 35 to maybe 43 states in America receive more than a dollar in federal income taxes that they put. So, for example, Florida, Iowa, Minnesota, maybe not Minnesota, Wyoming, etc. They get money from the federal government beyond what they put into the federal tax base, whereas California pays into the federal tax base and it gets less than the amount it pays to. So that's what it's called being a donor state. What that means is that we have to raise taxes on ourselves and we have to cut funding that we can spend on our own population. So we have some of the worst poverty areas some of the highest poverty, some of the worst infrastructure, worst schools, worst bridges, worst airports, worst seaports, and we get worse levies overseeing our capitals. And we can't really fix them because we don't have the money to do it because we're subsidized in 35 states. And this has gone on since the early 1990s. This is not new. This has gone on for 3 to 4 decades. And over time, you've seen the quality of life in California slowly degrade and fall, and we can't take care of ourselves, and we can't provide all the infrastructure. We have to keep raising taxes. Well, that's all because we're a donor state. So if we're independent, that would end. When we're looking at how California would affect Latin America, the majority ethnic group in California is Latinos. Mostly Mexican, not exclusively. A lot of El Salvadorans, Guatemaltecas, different people from around the world. Colombians, Chileans, got a lot of Chileans. So it's not just Mexicans, it's a wide variety of all Latin peoples. Largest ethnic group, I think about 45% of the population. And the majority of California's population is immigrants. I mean, well, not immigrants, it's non-Caucasian. So white people are about 40% of the population, 60% is non-white. That's almost not seen in America. Maybe Hawaii, maybe one or two other places in America you might see that. And when you look at the percentage of our population that is immigrant and travels abroad, it's the highest of any state in America. It's like a third of the population is immigrant or has ties to another part. You just don't see that demographic profile in America in general, or 47 out of 50 American states. So culture-wise, we're wildly out of point. It's not alive. So America's like, I don't know if immigration's a good idea, right? That's why they're picking Donald Trump for a second. In California, we've had immigration since 1550, the medieval ages. We've always had immigrants. We're majority immigrants. So this debate on is immigration a good idea? That's ridiculous for us. That's a settled debate. We cannot be anything but pro-immigrant. When half your majority population is non-white, the third of the population is immigrant. There's no like, oh, can we have immigrants? No, that's of course we do. In America, they have a debate on it, and in America, our governor was California's 30 years ahead of America. 3 decades, 30 years, 30 years ahead of America culturally. So wherever we're at now, it's going to be 30 years before America ever gets to our level. They're just not dealing with issues that we have as a people or with the people and demographic mix that we have. Just not. And they're not going to for a long time. But unfortunately, what's happened is, so if you look at the country, tiny little island, it's about half native Fijian and half Indian people who came from India to Fiji, which is a British colony. It's going somewhere.
Yeah.
For a long time, native Fijians were the majority of the population, like 60%. And then somewhere around the 1990s, they became 55%. And the Indian population that came from India moved up to 45. And then the Fijian native population dropped down to 52%. And then the Indian population rose up to 48%. It was a period of civil war for about 10 years. So when one ethnic group is in the majority and is starting to slip its majority status, it lashes out in violence and anger to hold on to its majority status. So when you had 60% of the population, you're a clear majority. When you have 55, you're not. When you have 52, you're not. So as you drop from 60 down to 55, down to 52%, you lash out in anger to hold on to power. And America is now in their demographic transition, where they're going from a majority white population to a majority minority population. However, according to a census that studies all the people in America, America's not going to come out on the other side of this demographic shift for another 2 decades. So it's going to be the year 2045 or roughly when we have a working quality unemployment laws for America as a majority minority population. Until such time, you can expect a lot more Donald Trumps, a lot more January 6th, and a lot more violence and violent rhetoric towards minorities for the next 20 years.
It is very interesting. In this field, I want to propose you something that I consider that could improve or increase the support of the movement. Right now, we know that in California, we have most of the social networks. In this case, I think that it is very important to articulate UX research to design the tools that we could need to make collective decision making. For the reason I shared the proposal with the University of San Diego, because I was seeing that they have a lab in this field. Right now, I have been attempting to propose it in Colombia or other countries, but the difference is that in California, most of people have a futuristic, mind-minded mindset, and it could, in this case, if you consider the situation that you need to make a decision in your state, we are not. I'm trying to be agnostic in this field, but if you are conducting a political campaign, we have a problem right now because you don't have a way to, for example, in this case, I am seeing that you have more than 180,000 people on email. And if we have some tool to organize the debate, the decision, the proposal for different type of stakeholders, the analysis that we can consider that it is better to separate than be engaged with the United States. So we must consider many affairs. In this case, I did a proposal to the Department of Government Efficiency on December of last year. Well, this proposal haven't been considered, and in my case, I put in the board everything that I have been researching, but it could be important to try to persuade the companies that are creating technologies in California in order to improve the current platforms for the benefit, specifically for this case in California. And in this case, with Hispanic countries that I was sharing with you, for example, next Sunday will be the election of Ecuador, and the president told that if he wins the elections again, he will promote a constitutional assembly. And right now, for example, I have been proposing the Twitter of Laos. I also propose it to an association of United States of Inventors that, for example, if we organize all the laws, all the constitution articles, and we promote the voting, different debate, different analysis, scientific analysis, things like that, that could organize everything that is considered in the decisions. And when we get a decision, we have everything ordered and the people can understand about it. In this case, for example, if you connect in the website, we can register in a newsletter, but we don't have a way to connect with the people. In my case, I have been trying to use the free tools that we have from California, YouTube or WhatsApp or LinkedIn, things like that. But I think that we need to focus in this way because it is a very good opportunity to think in a global way how we can think the way to manage the societies. And in California, I think that it is the best way because most of the companies are searching for the innovation. And well, in this case, I don't know, what do you think about it? I can put on the board all of the things that I have been researching, brainstorming, validating, and we can try to scale different proposal for California organization. And also, for example, in this case, for Colombia, because I am also trying with this public conversations to engage the support of different organizations across the globe. And also in this case that you are open to consider different options for migration. I would love to have the honor to become also a California citizen, mainly because California is the state where we have most of the social network. I have several ideas so new social network and to improve social network. So I don't know, what do you think about it, for example?
So this is absolutely the place to do it. Silicon Valley is the place where they're still making apps. I know that China's moving up, but China's market seems to be very, I think, China focused, and that means that the products made there aren't exactly seen as usable outside of China, including most of the entire West. So because of that, Silicon Valley is still the lead on products that you use ubiquitously across the West. So yeah, everything you're saying makes sense. So send me, just email me and just me and Jay proposals for what that will go.
Great, great. I'm trying to propose it because last year we started another movement from vision to global action, and we are creating awareness about the Human Right 27. The Human Right 27 give us the right to participate and enjoy in the scientific progress. It is something very important to think about the strategy because, for example, the software in the technical field of patents, the name is data system, data processing system or methods. We are talking about methods. The scientific process have been created about methods, but the point is that, for example, in this case, if we connect with the university, with the scientists of California and across the globe, for example, this week I sent an email from a research group in Mexico that they research in collective decision making, and I propose in the opportunity. So the point is that if we promote a study case for the scientists, it could be a more scientific background for everything we are doing. So, for example, in the case of the software of the patents, if we make the research and we think about a new method to improve something that already exists in the field of patents, it could be something that could be considered to use it. So this is something important, for example, like the principles that could guide a constitution. So I mean that it could improve us the weight and the background of the scientists, because I was reading that you have been talking with more than 200 scientists in politics. And well, if we organize everything about it, it could be a more informed decision and more decision with more scientific background. I think that it could be very important to uh, to persuade to the people about the situation. I don't know, what do you think about it, because we can continue. So in this case, we are announcing that it is a research opportunity for the university across the globe about the different problems that could be considered in this decision, because it is a very complex decision. And well, in your case, you have been working more than 1 decade about it.
Yes, yeah, we've been at it for about 12 years trying to push CalExit. I wrote a book, California's Next Century 2.0. Additionally, we that answers all your questions. And we're also proposing what's called a blue ribbon panel. So we want the government of California to do an official investigation into the idea of CalExit and to publish findings for the people of California. We know this is a complex topic. We know there's a lot of questions. And so we're following the model of Scotland. This is what Scotland did on their path to become devolved, is the term, and then fully independent. Although they didn't pass the full independence vote, they did have it set up. And the level of freedom that Scotland has from England is well beyond what most places have, especially California. It's light years ahead of us. They had a Coleman Commission. The Coleman Commission. All that was is that they ordered the Scottish government, Holyrood, that's the capital, to do an official investigation on what if we were independent from England and publish their findings. Historians of Scottish independence say that the day that that publication came out, Scotland was guaranteed to become more independent from England. They didn't even have the votes until a few more years. It was just the moment the government does an official investigation and releases findings, this topic has become officiated, serious. It's now valid. It can't be laughed at. It's a serious, worthy topic. It elevates the gravitas, the importance of it. So our plan is to have the California government do that too. And we think that that will provide a lot of information so that they can be informed for all the various technical, detailed decisions you're referencing.
So I was reading about the complexity of the separation considering the current constitution of United States. What can you share us about it? For example, if the referendum gets the no vote, it will be a no, or it requires more steps during this process?
So a lot of people in America are ignorant on secession. They just are. And that includes lawyers, that includes high-ranking federal lawyers, etc. We've seen a lot of ignorance. A lot of people who are lawyers are not aware of the actual law of secession. Most Americans are told as children, we had the Civil War and that settled it, period, end of story. And when you look at lawyers in America, a lot of them will cite that. They'll go, secession's legal. Well, how do you know? We had the Civil War. And that's what they'll say. The Civil War is not a legal decision. Not a court case, wasn't a precedent, and it's not a law. Lawyers are supposed to cite case law. That's why the entire American legal system is called stare decisis. That's Latin for case law, meaning you must study previous court cases. I can't say, hey, I think this should be illegal because I feel strongly. That's not the way that it works. You have to look at previous decisions by previous courts going all the way back. Like when you look at slavery, when you look at women's rights to vote, when you look at Black people having the right to vote, when you look at immigration reform, you have to say, based upon these previous court decisions, I argue this, period. That's the way the whole system works. So when lawyers come up and say secession's illegal and they don't reference a case, they're wrong. That's the whole point of that. That's not how that works. They're not historians, they're called lawyers. That means they have to reference a case. Most lawyers in America are completely ignorant of the one and only Supreme Court case on secession called Texas versus White. Texas versus White. It was a Supreme Court case on secession. It is the only one in American history, period, in story. That means it is the precedent for all decisions on secession, because according to the American Constitution, the Supreme Court settles all legal decisions. Period. Not Congress, not the President, not the Senate, not the House. Supreme Court says this is what the law says. Period. End of story according to the Constitution. The Constitution is also silent on secession. Doesn't ban it, doesn't allow it. So I've heard some people say, well, the Constitution doesn't allow secession, therefore it's illegal. That's not the way the Constitution works. So just because it doesn't allow it doesn't mean you can't do it. The federal government does something called interstate commerce. That's not in the Constitution either. Okay, so they take on new powers as they please. Just because something's not in the Constitution doesn't mean it's illegal. That's not the way that it works. That's not the way that it worked for the last 2 centuries. So we have to go to, is it banned? No, it's not banned in the Constitution either. It's just not even completely mentioned. Okay, well then we have to go to the Supreme Court, who will determine what the law says according to the Constitution. There's only one case, Texas versus White. It does say you can secede with, quote, consent of the states. The case was decided after the Civil War, which means it is legal precedent, not the Civil War. According to laws, you go over the most current law, not the last law. So, for example, when we look at slavery, we don't look at the 1832 Dred Scott decision. We look at the 1962 Civil Rights decision, right? We go off the most current law. And so therefore, Black people can't be slaves. They have to be free because that's the most current law. That's the way that it works, legal precedent. So because Texas versus White came after the Civil War, it is legal precedent, the Civil War. Secondly, the Civil War was not a legal decision. It's not transcribed in the law, so it can't be referenced by the law. Texas versus White can. Texas versus White says you can secede with consent to the states. Most of the newspapers in America will not admit that Texas versus White exists at all. That should be your first red flag that something's wrong. This is the only case law. We have mentioned this for the last 10 years. They will not mention it. So most newspapers won't mention that Texas versus White exists at all, period. If they do mention Texas versus White exists, they will not mention that it says you can secede with consent. What they'll say is that you can't secede, period. That's not what Texas versus White says. I don't know why the majority of American newspapers won't admit that Texas versus White exists, and I don't know why the majority of American newspapers won't admit that consent to the states is in Texas versus White, but anybody can look that up in 5 seconds online. So for whatever reason, that information is not being printed by the majority of American press, although it is 100% factual. That's part of the problem. Finally, when we get to consent, some newspapers, very few, have admitted Texas versus White exists and consent is there. But then they'll say, well, that means amendment. That means you must have a constitutional amendment to do this. And a constitutional amendment requires a huge percentage of the vote by the House and the Senate, and then ratification by a certain amount of states. It says consent of the states. It does not say amendment of the states. So if Texas versus White meant that the only way you could see is through the amendment process, why did they not say that in the law? The only people who can interpret what consent means is the Supreme Court, not an individual lawyer. There's also a top constitutional scholar in California called Erwin Chemerinsky. He's the top constitutional scholar in all of California by far. Nobody comes close to him in the American Constitution. He's also the most cited. He's the most cited legal expert in all of America, according to his Wikipedia page. That means he's the most referenced lawyer in all of America. He said in 2017, when asked about CalExit, in a GQ article called The Rise and Fall of CalExit by Daniel Riley, a simple majority vote of Congress could be all that's required to meet the consent doctrine. So, most newspapers won't admit Texas versus White exists. Most of them won't admit that it says consent. If they do, they'll say it's amendment. However, we have a top constitutional scholar in all of America and all of California who says that's not what it means at all. It can mean just a simple majority vote of Congress. Nobody can say except for the Supreme Court. So there's a lot of misinformation about there about the legality of secession, and we don't know why the media basically won't cover the central facts that we've been saying nonstop for years.
It is very important. I think that in this case, beyond the current situation with the courts, if we support the decision with the more rigorous scientific background, it will be very harder for any magistrate or judge to deny something that could be better for California. So in this case, for example, I want to go deep about some results of Dodge. In this case, it displayed that it had been saving approximately. Yeah, I'm talking about a GovTech initiative right now that it reduced $931 per taxpayer. In this case, for example, if we demonstrate everything related about the problem of the U.S. debt, because, for example, in this case, we can try to connect with the company that is located in Florida. They are creating this dashboard. In December, the U.S. debt was in 36.1 trillions or billions, and right now it is going to reach 37. And for example, in this case, U.S. government begin with Dodge, but it is reducing the problem, but it is not enough. So it is something important for California, because right now California is sending more taxes for the federal government, and it seems that the debt will be very complex or almost impossible to pay the debt. So the point is that I think that in this case, if we promote the debate with the students in different universities in California and across the globe, and for example, if we organize the potential constitutional articles in the website and all the debates about it, and we make the democratic process, and if we really demonstrate everything, and for example, if you are not participating or are not participating, everyone can upload everything in a platform, and the people can design by ourselves. So I think that in this point, if we promote the decentralization and we open the debate, okay, let's think about a new country. And in the first step, we must think in the theoretical way. We need to continue creating the arguments and the demonstration to prove that it will be better, because right now, for example, with the tariff, if Donald Trump says, okay, now I'm going to increase the tariff for China, for different countries, and now I'm going to block in 90 days. So it is something that promotes the speculation, that consider instability. And if, for example, in this case, if we have a specific state that only need to take decision with almost 40 million of people, maybe it could be better. So I am trying to promote the process. And for example, in this case, if we get inspired, for example, in a particular article or legislation in Colombia, Ecuador, or for example, in the case from my friend Ana Esther, that she located in Argentina, we can inspire how to use it, and we can have a global background about this initiative. Because, for example, in another field, many US inventors are fighting because the Congress is supporting the big tech and China. In this case, for example, I have been trying to explain that we must change the patents for software across the globe. And if we promote a theoretical framework to protect patents in California, because most of the companies are located in California, it could be something that could create a magnet for California, and it could improve it. For example, in another way, if we improve the organizational background from Delaware or Estonia, but we use it in California to facilitate the creation of companies in any place of the world, particularly in software or technology, I think that it could be something that could support the initiative and the movement. I don't know, what do you think about it, for example?
Set up conferences with universities or students, we love to open to them. Absolutely. So yes, love dialogue, love talking. If you want to set up more sessions like this was fun. Love speaking to people. Love getting out. Is this recorded, by the way? Any chance?
Yes, I am recording.
Awesome. Great. I hope you post it. I do want to say a few things about Doge, if I could. Is that okay, Andres?
I want to say, yes, it will be great. Yes, obviously.
Yeah, so, yes, Elon Musk is pursuing a lot of efficiency. Absolutely. Yes, they found a lot of savings. But I worked in government for about 25 years. Did you see the press conference where Elon Musk had to go in front of all of his cabinet secretaries and say he accidentally cut Ebola prevention, and then he didn't know he did that until someone brought it up to him, and then he goes, "No one does that." Government like that. Very for 25 years, you don't go, "Whoops, I accidentally cut Ebola prevention." Government in that way, any government site accidentally cut off the funding for this disease that liquidates human organs and is the most destructive thing we've ever seen and could have caused a pathogen outbreak that wiped out half our population. My bad. You're an idiot. Sorry, you don't talk that way to be taken seriously, period. My brother loves him. Look at all these savings. And I go, you accidentally cut Ebola prevention and then laughed it off in a government meeting. That's how serious you should be taken, period, end of story. Secondly, this guy gave the Nazi salute twice. Twice. We're all Latino here, right? Nobody here is a white, right? So how does that make brown-skinned people feel that this guy gave the Nazi salute not once, but twice, couldn't contextualize it, couldn't come out on TV and say that's not what I meant, just didn't address it at all? That's exactly what a guy called Donald Trump did when he said that all Mexicans are rapists. Remember that in 2016? When Trump came out and his first major speech was that Mexicans bring disease to America, a trope that the Nazis used against the Jews, and they are, quote, rapists. They're all rapists. And then when he was asked, wow, sounds like you're being racist, he goes, I'm not going to say anything, I'm not going to contextualize it, and I'm not going to apologize. Elon Musk is doing the same thing. Then, after he gives the Nazi salute twice, after coming on board with the president who said Mexicans are rapists, and they bring disease, saying they are giving to all these people. Are you out of your mind? That's Holocaust denial. That is the definition of madness and insanity. Did Holocaust denial after doing the Nazi salute twice? Or
Yes.
that's called racism. They don't like you, don't see you as equal, and you're beneath them. Let's also talk about another thing. J.D. Vance, the vice president, chosen by Donald Trump. You know when Donald Trump first reached out to J.D. Vance to ask him to join his campaign? It was right after J.D. Vance won his own race. Did you know how J.D. Vance won his race in Ohio? He almost was going to lose, and then he ran a TV commercial that put him over the top. And after he won on this TV commercial, that's when Donald Trump reached out to him. You know what that TV commercial was on this?
Yeah, yeah. I didn't see it.
Run a television commercial where he said, "Do you hate Mexicans?" And it was after he put that racist television commercial out that he won. And then that's when Donald Trump reached out to him. So let's review here. We have a vice president who says, "Do you hate Mexicans?" We have a president who says Mexicans bring disease and are rapists. Then he hangs out with the guy who does Holocaust denial and who accidentally cuts Ebola funding. And then Donald Trump commits an insurrection, the first time the Capitol stormed since 1812. That's highly destabilizing. As a Latino, I'm well aware how America's invaded every single Latin American country and destabilized it through invasion over the last 2 centuries since Teddy Roosevelt. When you storm a capital, you destabilize the country. Then he did that. Then he got excused for that. Then the Republican Party stopped condemning that. These are dangerous people who occupy tropes and use language that says that Latin people are not human and are inferior to white people. And I think all Latin people who speak about these people should be fully aware of the statements that they've made. Don't you agree, Andres?
Yes, yes, I agree. But in this point, I consider, for example, in this case, that we must we must integrate between more of the 8.2 billions of humans. And concerning this behavior, for example, last year when I was detained in California, I proposed to make a book with the revolution of fraternity. For example, in this case, if we begin to create a specific culture in California or specific places, we can promote the change of the behavior, because sometimes when the people is in the power or have many money, they are not aware about many positions. For example, with Donald Trump, I am perceiving that sometimes he's very arrogant. And in this case, for example, we must learn something about the Asian, because they are more humble and they are representing the United States. And in this case, we must try to the right, I don't know the right translation in English, but the word in Spanish is exhortation. When someone is making a behavior and you try to change it, because this is something that we must consider. For example, and it is a cultural problem that we must try to tackle. But
I still believe you don't need big government regulations and you don't need heavy taxes, and you don't have to do that to have a progressive liberal society. I've always felt that way. My problem is that when people talk about government efficiency, for whatever reason, they tend to be seen next to people who say, "Do you hate Mexicans and Mexicans are rapists?" And I don't know why that has to be. You don't have to be a racist. You don't have to be xenophobic and also believe in government regulation being reduced and less government taxes. But for some reason, the Republican Party is bound and wed to constantly merge government reform with white supremacy. I left with 2012 with Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney ruined the Latin participation for the Republican Party. George W. Bush, for all of his faults, and I didn't like the Iraq War and protested against it. I thought it was horrifying and un-American. He had 50% of the Latin vote in America.
For example, in United States, I would like to make a benchmark, a comparison, because I perceive that United States is less democratic than, for example, Colombia. In your case, you have only two political parties. In Colombia, we have more than 40, and it is very relatively easy to create a political party. But the point is, for example, if we compare this point, because I am not agree with the way the election of United States with a ranking from different states, it doesn't use the vote of many people. You only make if you I am not sure how it works, but I am not agree the way that how you shoot a president, and it is something that must be considered, and it could be a support about the specific changes that you are proposing in California as a country. And if we are agree, for example, with the database that you have been collecting, we share it. Okay, what you think about the decision? For example, if we make a simulation of a referendum of decisions and we start to share it, the people can engage. Okay, I think that we must change it. In this case, I would like to propose you to connect with a company that both of the founders are located in California. Nobody studio. I'm sharing the website of them. They told that they are crowd infused, and they have the mission to create 100 companies in less than 5 years. But the point is that we need to think about crowd voting, crowd innovation, crowd research, crowd invention. And if we talk about this framework, we can design specific tools to connect the people in the movement. And well, it doesn't matter the final output unless we are trying to be to be as much democratic and scientific as possible. And well, but for the reason I am trying to go deep about the tools, because the tools are very important. And if we get the support of any company in California or any other part in the world, it will be great to support the movement and think about the future of the decisions in the society, because I think that it is the main problem. And for example, in this case, I am not sure about the articles of the Minister of Foreign Relations of United States, and I shared it with you, the 35 article of Colombia. And in this case, if you read the article, they must support it. I don't know, for example, in the case of United States, but for example, we have also some crimes that could inspire California that it could be useful. For example, the pre-barricade. So the point is that if we start to make the benchmark, and many people support it, for example, in the case of my friend of Argentina, that they also could consider different things, it will get more support. And well, we can promote the debate across the globe. And California, in this case, could be on the edge in this field, because it is very complex when you are in undeveloped country, because many people is not very well educated, and it is very complex to explain them if something is better than another thing. So if we have the support of a more advanced state or country, I think that it could be useful to reach the goals.
I'm saying that we got a limited time here. I love it. And if you could post this recording somewhere and then email me the link, you got my email. If if you could publish this and then send me the link and then we'll share it with our group, I'm willing to come back and do more of these. So if you can get more people together, we can have the conversations that you're talking about, and I'll keep coming back, no problem.
What do you think if you, for example, separate one day in a week or 2 days in a month, that we can talk to the people, that we have public meetings and we start to create a community? Because in this case, I shared the link recently and the people could be busy, but if we put a day, the people could engage with the conversation. And I propose to you that we can upload the conversation in the YouTube channel of CalExit. I am going to upload it in the YouTube channel of the peace process that we are conducting in Colombia. And well, I am going to upload it in the YouTube channel. Great, great, great. Great, great, great. It will be great for me. Awesome.
Yeah, we'll do it just like this, super easy. You send me the link. I'm committing Friday at 12. We'll do another one. Tell everybody to give them a full 7 days, and I really appreciate you doing this. And I really appreciate you having me on. I love conversation. We love dialogue. We love reaching out, and we also want to reach out to let them know that Native to California will be a much better part of America ever.
I think in the case of the population that is from Latin America or the migrants in California, probably we can discuss a potential legislation specifically for California. The point is that I think that we must think in the theory for studying, because the theory could provide the support of the people. If we, for example, begin to make the conversation about how we can think about the legislation for migrants in California, maybe we can get the support of Latin people or migrants. I think that it is very important to think about it, because in the case of most of North Americans, they are not aware that most of Latins and migrants that are not documented, they are the people. So they are doing the jobs that residents or citizens don't want to make. And it is something important, because in one way or another, the people of the base of the pyramid is undeserved and it is not valued. And it is something important, because we are thinking about robotics, automatization, artificial intelligence, but it seems that we don't have enough non-renewable resources, and we are composed as humans with more chemical elements than a robot. If we create a robot use a lot of chemical elements that are scarce. So it is something important that maybe if we support the decision in California, it could be important. Another important point that, for example, in your case, you are making a crowdfunding campaign and donation. I have been proposing to the banks of Colombia that we need to make a special kind of account to promote the transparency. For example, if someone make a donation, they can track all the transaction of the movement. And for example, we can create rules. If you make a donation for a specific affair, the money only will be used for this specific affair, because right now the nonprofits, they manage the money and they make annual reports. But I think that it is another important tool to improve the transparency in the support, the financial support for the movement. And it is something that we can think also to innovate in this field.
Yeah, let's
Great, great, awesome. Great. Well, I don't know if you want to share a little bit about the token. I think that maybe we can think.
I'll tell you that this is the token. It's going to be called a Cali Nation token. It's based upon the image of Califia. That's the woman there. Califia was the mythical warrior queen that the Spaniards felt that they saw when they landed in California first. They were reading a book called something de Esplanadon, and it had it in there. So the Spaniards on the ship that came in through San Diego Harbor, I think around 1532 or something, or 1550, looked and they thought the indigenous people, because they had long dark hair and were very tan, they thought they were African women. And so they thought it was a mythical warrior queen. And so the name of California comes from Calibia, who was a mythical African warrior queen, documented in a novel that Spanish sailors were reading on the boat when they arrived in California. That's where the name comes from. So the token's based upon that. It's inherent Spanish culture going back about 5 centuries. And we wanted to tie the future California nation to its original past. California is older than America by about 100 years. Before there were even pilgrims who became the Proto-Americans, California already had established itself for 100 years prior to that. So before the first inkling of America ever happened, we already had an established colony here, and our culture was independent for multiple hundreds of years, maybe like 300 to 400 before America came and it conquered it under the mantra of manifest destiny. I'll remind all Latin people, manifest destiny was the theory that white people are superior to all. If you type in manifest destiny on Wikipedia, you'll see a poster of a white woman chasing away Mexicans and Indians, okay, because they're not white. That was the animating philosophy that motivated Americans to invade California, and then they made sure all the Latin people couldn't vote anymore, all the Asian people couldn't vote, own property, and all the Black people had to have their children in segregated schools. Additionally, they launched a full-on genocide against the indigenous people of what's called the Gold Rush country. The genocide was as extensive and documented as the Nazi genocide against the Jews. There are literally receipts from the California government for indigenous people's heads.
Interesting.
All recorded. That's
Very, very interesting. So great. So in this field, it's something that I have been considering that in the future we are going to have a problem with the parity of different coins, the stable coins, the financial assets with the crypto assets and things like that. I think that it could be a great opportunity to consider how to exchange value, that it is the technical property of money, considering that you are planning a coin, a token in this field. And we can try to connect with the organization that already attempted to make a stable coin. I don't remember one of the first stable coin that I was reading that started in California. And also, for example, Meta tried to make a stable coin, and well, it could be great to try to open the discussion and see who can connect with the movement and the goals of the movement.
absolutely. Let's set up for Friday 12. I'll try to have Jason on. Jason's an expert on the token, and we can go from there.
Great.
Please email me a recording wherever this is posted, and we'll make sure to share it widely.
Yeah, I'm going to share the recording and the link of the transcription to make any prompt if you want to use it.
I appreciate that.
Okay. Thanks for your time, Marcus, and thanks for the opportunity to contribute in this important opportunity and the important decision for California and the world. It is more important than many people in the globe can consider, because in California right now, if we are connected in the world is mainly due to California innovation. So thank you so much for everything your state have been doing for humanity. And well, I am another server for this purpose, and I hope to become at least a California citizen, considering the United States. Okay.
So, gracias a todos. Thank you for letting me participate. And I'll see you soon.
See you soon, Marcus. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Adiós a todos.
Adios. Well, we are closing at 5:00 April 11.